Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the coldest, hungriest, and most miserable places you could ever find yourself. No castles, no gallant knights, no feasts. Just a city turned into rubble. The air thick with smoke, and a winter so sharp it can split skin. We're going to talk about what it was actually like to be a Soviet soldier in Stalingrad during World War II. And spoiler alert, you wouldn't have lasted long. Not a week, maybe not even a day. Before we get started, take a second to actually get comfortable. Maybe turn down the lights, pull a blanket over yourself, and remember that what you're sitting on is probably warmer, softer, and cleaner than anything a soldier there had for months. If you've got something hot to drink, enjoy it now, because in Stalingrad, you'd have been lucky if it wasn't frozen solid. Now picture this, it's late 1942. The Germans have already bombed the city into something that looks like the inside of a demolished factory. The streets are broken concrete, twisted steel, and scattered bricks, with black smoke drifting through the air. The Volga River, which should be running, is crusted over with ice, and crossing it means dodging bullets and bombs. You've just arrived here, maybe on a rickety boat at night, maybe crawling through snow to avoid artillery fire. You're not here to win medals. You're here because if you're not, someone back home will want to know why. And in the Soviet Union, that's not a conversation you survive. The first thing you notice is the cold. Not the kind of cold where you put on an extra jacket and complain about it. This is the kind of cold that makes your lungs hurt when you breathe, that freezes your sweat into ice the second it hits your skin. Your boots are already leaking, your gloves are thin, and your greatcoat smells like the last person who wore it, because it probably belonged to a dead soldier. The wool is stiff from frost, and no matter how tight you wrap it around you, the wind still finds a way inside. You can feel your toes going numb, and you've only been standing here for 5 minutes. Somewhere nearby, a German artillery shell hits, and the sound is so sharp it feels like it went through your chest. Chunks of brick fall from a wall behind you, and you catch yourself ducking, even though you're supposed to be used to this by now. But you're not. No one is. The ground shakes every few minutes, and you learn quickly that the safest place is not in a trench or behind a wall, because both can be gone in seconds. The safest place doesn't exist here. Around you are men in the same filthy uniforms, most of them underfed, many of them coughing. The faces are thin, eyes sunken, lips cracked from the wind. They don't talk much, partly because there's nothing to say, partly because sound travels, and the enemy is close enough to hear. In some streets, close means you could throw a rock and hit them. You start to realise that Stalingrad isn't a city anymore. It's a maze of destroyed buildings, frozen corpses, and places to hide until someone finds you and shoots you. The air has its own weight. It's a mix of smoke from fires that never go out, the sharp bite of explosives, and the sick, sweet smell of things you'd rather not identify. You try not to breathe through your nose, but your mouth is so dry from the cold that it hurts to keep it open. If you thought you might get a little rest here, forget it. Sleep comes in short bursts, if at all, and when you do manage to close your eyes, you're lying on a frozen floor. Maybe a pile of rags, maybe bare earth. If you're lucky, you're indoors, though indoors here means half a wall and no roof, with snow drifting in. If you're not lucky, you're in a trench or shell hole, wrapped in a damp blanket that does nothing. And the whole time, you keep one ear open for footsteps, gunfire, or the heavy thud of a mortar. That's your welcome to Stalingrad. You haven't even fired a shot yet. You haven't met the rats, or the hunger, or the special kind of misery that comes when your rifle freezes shut in the middle of a fight. You're still breathing, but you're already starting to understand why a lot of men here didn't last long. You step off the boat in the dark, the icy air cutting through every layer you've got on. It's supposed to be night, but the sky isn't black. It's a deep, shifting orange from the fires that have been burning for days, maybe weeks. Every so often, the glow brightens when something else explodes. You don't ask what it was. It's just another building gone, another hole in the city, another place you might end up sleeping if you make it through the night. The wooden planks of the landing are slick with ice, and you nearly slip before you even get to solid ground. Someone shoves you forward. There's no time to take in the view, no time to look at the other men stepping off behind you. You've already got that smell in your nose. It's part gunpowder, part frozen sewage, part rotting food, and part something else you know is human. It's so strong it clings to the inside of your mouth. Stalingrad doesn't look like a city anymore. Whatever it was before the fighting started, that's gone. There's no skyline, no main street, no neighbourhoods. It's all jagged brick walls, collapsed roofs, and skeletal factories with twisted steel beams reaching into the sky like broken fingers. The snow is grey, crusted with ash and bits of plaster, and every step crunches like you're walking on glass. The first voice you hear is someone yelling orders. Short, clipped words you barely make out over the sound of gunfire somewhere ahead. You move in a line, keeping your head low. A man stumbles past you carrying a crate of ammunition on his shoulder, his coat flapping open because he's either too cold to notice or too tired to care. His face is pale, almost grey, and his eyes look right through you. You keep walking, because stopping here is asking to be noticed, and being noticed in this place doesn't usually end well. Every few minutes, another explosion shakes the ground. You can feel it through the soles of your boots, the vibration running up your legs. Pieces of stone and glass rain down from somewhere above, and you duck instinctively, your breath catching in your throat. You're already learning the rhythm. A distant whistling sound means you have seconds to find something solid between you and whatever's coming. The unit you're supposed to join is somewhere near the tractor factory, though factory is a loose term now. The building's mostly gone, just a few walls and a roof, with holes big enough to drive a truck through. You're told the men are holding the line there, which means sleeping inside when they can, fighting in the rubble when they can't. On the way, you pass a group of soldiers, crouched behind a low wall, their rifles resting on the top edge. They don't look up when you go by. One of them is smoking, the tip of his cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. You wonder how he got it. Tobacco is as rare as bread here. The streets you move through aren't streets anymore. They're narrow paths between heaps of debris, some of it from buildings, some of it from people who didn't make it to cover in time. You don't look too closely. The snow covers some of it, but not enough. Sometimes a boot sticks out. Sometimes an arm. It's better to keep your eyes ahead. Somewhere off to the right, a machine gun opened up. The sound is sharp and fast, echoing off the broken walls. You press yourself against a doorway, the stone cold against your cheek, and wait until it stops. You can hear boots running on the other side of the street, the crunch of snow mixed with the clink of metal gear. Someone shouts something in German, Then there's another burst of fire. You don't see who wins. When you finally reach what's left of your position, the first thing you notice is the cold isn't any better inside. In fact, it's worse. The wind whips through the gaps in the walls, carrying with it flakes of ash and snow that stick to your coat. There's no fire. Smoke would draw attention, and attention here is fatal. The floor is a mix of ice, dirt, and bits of broken machinery. A few men are sitting on crates, cleaning rifles with numb fingers. They glance at you, but no one says anything. You're just another body filling a spot left empty by someone else. You find a space against the wall and drop your pack. Your hands are stiff from the cold, and it takes effort to unbuckle the straps. Inside the pack, there's not much. A few strips of hard bread, a tin cup, and some extra rounds for the rifle they just handed you. The rifle's old, the stock scratched and dented, the bolt stiff. You work it back and forth a few times until it slides a little easier. If it freezes in a fight, you won't have time to fix it. The man next to you coughs into his sleeve, a dry, hacking sound that doesn't stop for a while. When he does, he spits something dark onto the floor and wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. He doesn't look at you, just keeps adjusting the strap on his helmet. You realise quickly that people here don't waste energy on introductions. No one asks where you're from or how long you've been in the army. They just look you over, decide whether you're going to be trouble, and then go back to whatever they were doing. It doesn't take long before you hear the next set of orders. You're moving out again before you even get a chance to rest. The Germans are pushing into a nearby street, and your group is supposed to hold them off until reinforcements can arrive, which might mean minutes, or might mean never. You sling the rifle over your shoulder, the weight of it pulling down on your already stiff muscles. Your breath fogs in the air as you follow the others back out into the open. The wind hits you like a wall. Your eyes water instantly, and you blink hard to clear them. Snow swirls through the air, mixing with ash from a fire burning somewhere to the east. You can smell it, the sharp bite of burning wood and something heavier, oily, probably fuel. It makes your throat tighten. You keep moving, stepping over chunks of concrete, ducking under collapsed beams. The sound of gunfire grows louder, and now you can hear voices. Short bursts of shouting in both Russian and German. The line between the two sides here isn't a clean front. It's a tangled mess of ruined buildings, alleys and cellars. Sometimes you're only meters apart, separated by nothing more than a wall full of holes. A man ahead of you drops to one knee and signals for the rest of you to get down. You press yourself into the snow, the cold seeping instantly through your coat and into your skin. Your fingers are numb on the rifle stock. You can hear the snap of bullets passing overhead, sharp and fast. Bits of plaster fall from the wall beside you, dusting your shoulder. You keep your head down, waiting for the signal to move. When it comes, it's quick. You scramble forward, slipping on the frozen ground, and duck into what used to be a doorway. Inside it's dark, the air thick with dust. There's a hole in the far wall where the rest of the street used to be. Beyond it, you can see flashes of light from gunfire. Someone shouts for you to cover the opening, and you drop to one knee, the rifle braced on the edge of the wall. You scan the street, your breath loud in your own ears. You stay crouched by the hole in the wall until the firing dies down. The man next to you waves for you to move, and you follow him deeper into the building. It's barely standing. One good artillery hit and the whole place will come down. But for now, this is where you live. You don't get a key. You don't get a bunk. You don't even get a roof. What you get is 4 half-broken walls, a dirt floor mixed with brick dust, and a smell that hits you before you've even picked a corner to sit in. The place was probably a workshop before the bombing. You can still see the outlines of benches and machinery, now twisted and half buried in debris. A beam leans across the middle of the room, charred black from a fire that burned itself out long ago. The wind moves through gaps in the walls, whistling in a way that makes it sound almost alive. Somewhere above you, the ceiling groans as if it knows it's not going to hold much longer. You pick a spot along one wall, away from the largest holes but close enough to see the door in case anyone comes through. The floor is cold through your coat, a kind of cold that feels like it's seeping into your bones. You look for something to put down between you and the ground. Rags, old sacks, anything, but there's nothing. A few pieces of wood are scattered near the far wall, but they're damp and frozen solid. There's no furniture left, just broken crates and splinters. Some of the men here have built little barricades from the rubble, stacking bricks and metal sheets to block the wind. You can tell who's been here a while. Their spots are reinforced, maybe even with a blanket hanging like a curtain. The newer ones, like you, just find an empty patch of wall and sit. You don't ask to move in. If the space is empty, you take it. If it's not, you keep looking. It's not quiet here. Even when there's no shooting, the city has its own noises. The creak of shifting walls, the rattle of loose metal, the distant crash of something finally collapsing. Every sound makes you glance up, wondering if this is the moment your shelter becomes another pile of rubble. The floor is littered with things you don't want to think about. Old bandages, shattered bottles, pieces of boots that still have bits of foot inside. In one corner, there's a frozen shape under a tarp. No one touches it. No one talks about it. You just make sure you're not sleeping next to it. Your gear stays close. Not because you're worried someone will steal it, though they might, but because you have to be ready to move in seconds. There's no guarantee you'll get a warning before the next shell lands. A lot of men keep their rifles in their hands even when they sleep. The thought of fumbling for it in the dark while someone's already stepping over you isn't worth the risk. The wind finds every gap in the walls. It snakes around your neck, through your sleeves, down your boots. You pull your coat tighter, but it doesn't help much. The greatcoat is heavy, stiff from frost, and smells like a mix of sweat, wet wool, and smoke. You wonder who wore it before you. You decide not to wonder too hard. Outside, the streets aren't any better. A street here is a trench made of collapsed buildings. You move through them hunched over, stepping over bricks and bits of twisted rebar. The snow in these alleys is never clean. It's streaked with soot, ash, and something darker. You don't ask about that either. The building you're calling home tonight might be gone by morning. The Germans shell at random, sometimes for hours, sometimes just 1 or 2 rounds, to keep everyone on edge. You get used to the sound of incoming fire, but you never really relax. The quiet is worse in some ways, because you know it's not going to last. It never does. There's no light inside, no candles, no lamps. Those just make you a target. The only light comes from cracks in the walls, from the dim reflection of fires burning somewhere else. At night, it's almost total darkness, and you navigate by memory and touch. You learn where the holes in the floor are, where the sharp bits of metal stick out, where the walls are weak. If you're lucky, you get to share the space with men you already know from your unit. If not, you just hope the strangers next to you aren't desperate enough to take your food or your boots while you're asleep. It's not personal. Desperation here isn't. It's just survival, and everyone's playing by the same rules. You hear movement above you and freeze. It's not the creak of the ceiling this time. It's boots on wood, deliberate steps. Everyone in the room stops breathing for a moment. Then a voice calls something in Russian, and the tension breaks a little. Just another patrol coming through. This time, the cold doesn't let you rest. Even when you pull your coat over your head, your breath just makes the inside damp, and the wind cuts through that too. Your fingers stay stiff, and your toes go from cold to numb to painful again. You try shifting positions, but the ground is hard and uneven, and every time you find something that feels bearable, another draft of icy air sneaks in. Somewhere outside, another building comes down. You feel the vibration through the wall, then hear the distant rumble as it settles. You know it wasn't far away, and you wonder if anyone was inside. You wonder for about 3 seconds before pushing the thought out of your head. You try to tell yourself you'll get used to it. The cold, the dark, the constant noise of the city tearing itself apart. But when you finally try to sleep here, you learn there's no getting used to it. Not really. You just reach a point where exhaustion forces your body to shut down for a while, no matter how bad the conditions are. The first problem is the ground. You're lying on frozen dirt mixed with brick dust, jagged bits of metal, and the occasional splinter from some shattered beam. There's no mattress, no bedding. If you're lucky, you've got a blanket, though blanket might just mean an old coat you found on a body that wasn't too far gone. You lay it down, not for warmth, but just to put something between you and the ice underneath. It doesn't help much. The cold seeps straight through it and into your bones. The wind finds you even here. It slips in through gaps in the walls, swirls around your head, and leaves frost on your hair by morning. You pull your coat tighter, try curling into a ball, but it doesn't stop. The coat smells of damp wool and sweat, with a layer of smoke that never goes away. The smell is in your skin now. You could scrub until your hands bled, and it would still be there. You keep your boots on when you sleep. Everyone does. It's not because you're afraid someone will steal them, though that happens. It's because once you take them off, you might not get them back on. The leather stiffens in the cold, the laces freeze solid, and your feet swell from the damp and frostbite. Better to keep them on, no matter how badly they rub or how much your toes ache. There's no such thing as quiet. Even in the middle of the night, there's always something. A distant artillery barrage, a sudden burst of machine gun fire, boots crunching in the snow outside, or the deep rumble of another building collapsing. Sometimes it's close enough to rattle the wall you're leaning against, showering you with dust and tiny bits of plaster. You learn to open your mouth when the explosions hit. Keeps your eardrums from bursting. Then there are the rats. You hear them before you see them, scratching in the corners, knocking over bits of rubble, skittering across the floorboards above. They're fat here, fat from the bodies. You don't think about that when one runs over your legs in the dark. You just pull the coat tighter and pretend you didn't feel the claws. And the lice. You didn't notice them at first, but you do now. Your skin crawls constantly. Your scalp itches. Your wrists and waist are raw from scratching. Everyone has them. You try to ignore it, but the more you lie still, the more you feel them moving. Some men strip down when they can and run a candle flame along the seams of their clothes to kill them. Here, you can't risk the light. Sleep doesn't come easy, and when it does, it's shallow and full of interruptions. You drift off for a few minutes, then wake at some noise. Maybe real, maybe just in your head. When you do manage to stay under, the dreams aren't any better than the waking hours. Sometimes you're back home, warm, with a full stomach, and then you wake up to the sound of a mortar shell going off nearby. Other times you dream you're in the middle of the fighting, and waking up is no relief at all because the sound of gunfire is actually happening outside. You keep the rifle close, usually right under your arm or across your chest. If you're called to move, there's no time to look for it. The worst way to wake up here is to the sound of boots pounding past you and realizing you've got nothing in your hands. The second worst way is to the sound of someone screaming. You learn not to ask questions when that happens. Your body never really warms up. Even buried under your coat, knees tucked to your chest, arms wrapped tight, you shiver. Sometimes it's violent enough to wake you up. Your teeth chatter, and your breath fogs in the dark. If you press your hands together, it's not for prayer. It's just to feel a little heat from your own skin. When morning comes, it's not because the sun woke you. You can't see the sun here. It's just a little less dark, that's all. And the cold feels worse than it did the night before. Your joints ache from lying on the hard ground. Your back is stiff, and your feet feel like they've turned into blocks of wood. You stand up slowly, listening for the cracks in your knees, and wondering if this is the day frostbite takes something permanent. There's no stretch, no yawn, no easing into the day. You just get up because the alternative is staying where you are until something lands on the roof and buries you in it. You brush off the frost, sling the rifle over your shoulder, and step back out into the ruins. You're not rested. You're not ready. But no one here is. And the day doesn't wait for you to feel like starting it. You step outside, and the air immediately punches you in the face. It's colder than it was in the night, somehow sharper, like the wind's been waiting for you to come out so it can take another layer off your skin. You don't get a sunrise. The skies are dull grey, choked with smoke and dust, and whatever light manages to make it through just makes everything look more dead. There's no gentle start to the day here, no slow shuffle to the kitchen, no coffee smell drifting in from the next room. The first thing you hear is artillery, heavy, distant, but moving closer with every shot. You start counting without thinking about it. You're 1, 2, 3. The pause before the next round isn't long enough to relax. And then a sharper crack. That's small arms not far away. The morning's already begun without you. Someone yells from inside the building you just left. It's not a calm, steady voice. It's short, fast, urgent. You catch only half the words, but you know what they mean. Get moving. You tighten the strap on your helmet, check your rifle still working, and head toward the sound. The streets are just as bad in daylight. Maybe worse, because now you can see everything you were trying not to think about last night. The outlines of bodies under snowdrifts, shattered helmets, a frozen arm sticking out from a collapsed wall. You keep walking because stopping here isn't an option. The smell's stronger in the morning, especially when the wind changes. Burning wood, fuel, and the heavy stench of things that used to be alive. Your stomach turns, but you've got nothing in it to throw up. You swallow hard and breathe through your mouth, which just makes your tongue stick to the inside of your teeth from the cold. The ground under your boots crunches and shifts. It's a mix of snow, ice, and broken brick, and it never feels stable. Every step's a reminder that you're walking over what used to be someone's home, someone's shop, someone's street. Now it's all just another route to the next fight. The artillery gets closer. You can tell by the way the sound changes, not just the boom, but the way it hits you in the chest. Dust falls from the walls. You glance up automatically, checking for anything ready to drop. No one here needs to tell you twice that being indoors doesn't make you safe. A runner passes you, breath steaming in the cold, boots slipping on the ice. He's shouting something about a position up ahead, but he doesn't slow down to explain. You just keep following the others in your unit, trusting that they know where they're going. You're still new enough to not know which piles of rubble belong to which side. Then it happens, the whistle of incoming fire. It's high, fast, and you feel it in your gut before you even react. You dive toward the nearest wall, landing hard on your side. The shell hits somewhere behind you, the explosion kicking up a blast of snow and ash. Bits of metal ping off the wall. You get back to your feet as soon as the ringing in your ears fades enough to hear again. That's the alarm clock here. You don't get snooze. You don't get 10 more minutes. You get up, grab your rifle, and hope you're still in one piece by the time the next round lands. You'd think the Red Army would have given you something built for this kind of weather. You'd be wrong. What you've got is a thin greatcoat that might have been worn back when it was first issued, probably to a man who's been dead for months, and a pair of trousers so worn you can feel the seams rubbing your skin raw. The coat is heavy, stiff from frost, and smells like a mix of damp wool, smoke, and someone else's sweat. You stop noticing after a while, not because it's gone, but because there's worse smells here now. Underneath, you've got layers that barely count as insulation. A thin shirt, maybe a sweater if you were lucky when supplies came through. Most of the time, the cold just works its way in, like it owns the place. It creeps down your sleeves, slides up your cuffs, and wraps itself around your spine until you feel it in your teeth. The boots are the worst, if you even have boots. Plenty of men are wearing whatever they found on the dead. German boots, civilian shoes, anything with a sole still attached. Yours are leather, cracked so deep you can see the stitching inside, with the soles that have gone soft from weeks of snow and ice. The laces freeze solid overnight, and if you didn't keep them on while you slept, you'd spend half the morning trying to force your feet back in. Socks are a luxury. Most men just wrap rags around their feet, change them when they're soaked, and hope frostbite doesn't set in before the end of the week. Gloves? If you've got them, they're fingerless, which makes them almost pointless. The cold bites through the wool in seconds, and you can't do much about it. You need bare fingers to work the rifle's bolt or load a magazine, but the moment you take the gloves off, your hands go numb. You try blowing on them, rubbing them together, shoving them under your arms. It doesn't matter. The cold always wins. The helmet's a thin piece of steel that keeps shrapnel out of your skull if you're lucky, but it doesn't stop the cold from gnawing at your ears. You can't line it with anything thicker than a scarf, because then it won't sit right. So you just deal with it, cheeks and ears burning red until they go pale. The early sign you're losing the fight to frostbite. The weight of all of it slows you down. The coat, the ammo pouches, the canteen, the rifle, the pack, with whatever scraps of food you've got left, it all adds up. You feel it in your shoulders by midday, in your knees by nightfall. But you can't strip any of it off. Not unless you want to be caught unprepared when the shooting starts, which can happen at any second. You hear about new uniforms sometimes, padded jackets, warmer boots, but you never see them. They're for someone else, somewhere else. Here, you make do with what you've got, even if it's barely holding together. If a seam rips, you stitch it with wire or a bit of cord. If the sole starts coming off your boot, you tie it up with string from an old ammo crate. You keep wearing it until it rots off you, or you die in it. Nothing's clean. There's no washing, no change of clothes, no way to dry anything out once it's wet. If you fall into a snowdrift or step into slush, you just keep walking in it, the wet cloth freezing against your skin until it feels like part of you. And when it finally thaws from your body heat, it's only to soak you all over again. You scratch at your collar where the lice have made themselves at home. You pull the coat tighter when the wind hits, and you keep moving because the uniform may be useless against the cold, but it's all you've got between you and the bare winter air that's waiting to finish the job. Breakfast isn't a meal here. It's a pause. A few minutes where you put something in your stomach so it doesn't eat itself before noon. You're not looking forward to it. No one is. The best thing you can say about breakfast in Stalingrad is that sometimes it exists. You start the day cold, stiff, and hungry. That gnawing, hollow kind of hunger that makes your ribs ache. The kind that's been there for weeks, never fully going away, just changing in intensity depending on how long it's been since your last bite. By the time you reach wherever the morning rations are being handed out, you're already telling yourself not to expect much. There's no mess hall, no long tables, no smell of bacon or bread in the air. Breakfast is a couple of men crouched behind a half-collapsed wall, standing over a pot balanced on a blackened metal frame. The fire underneath is weak, barely more than embers, because smoke draws attention. And here, attention gets people killed. The pot isn't clean. It hasn't been clean in weeks. Scraping it out would mean wasting food that's stuck to the sides, so whatever was in there yesterday, or last week, is still there today, boiled into the morning's ration. It's not a stew. Stew implies flavour. This is hot water thickened with whatever scraps the quartermaster could scavenge. A handful of millet, some potato peelings, maybe a bit of cabbage if the supply lines got lucky. You get in line, clutching your tin cup or dented bowl, waiting your turn. No one talks much. Talking wastes energy, and you don't have that to spare. The man in front of you shifts from foot to foot, his breath steaming in the cold. You watch him hold out his cup, see the ladle dip into the pot, and hear the thin slop hit the bottom. Steam rises for a second before the wind carries it away. When it's your turn, you step forward and hold your cup steady. The ladle drops in 2 scoops, maybe 3 if the man serving is in a generous mood. The liquid's greyish, with bits of something floating in it that might have once been vegetables. You don't ask what they are. You don't want to know. Sometimes the meat in there isn't from an animal anyone would choose to eat. Sometimes there's no meat at all, just the flavour of whatever bones boiled in it weeks ago. There's bread, if you can call it that. A chunk is shoved into your other hand. Hard, dense, and frozen solid. It's made from whatever flour was available, which usually means rye or barley. bulked out with sawdust or ground straw when supplies are bad. You can't tear it with your hands without risking frostbitten fingers, so you either gnaw at it like a dog with a bone, or soak it in the soup until it softens enough to chew. Even then, it still feels like it's fighting you. Sometimes there's no bread at all, just an extra ladle of soup. Sometimes there's a spoonful of lard on the side, and you spread it on your bread as best you can, knowing it'll be the only fat you get all day. You eat it fast before it freezes again. Your drink is the same thing it's been every morning. Tea if you're lucky, hot water if you're not. Real tea leaves are rare, so most of the time it's just boiled water with a few burned leaves from the bottom of the last pot, strained through a piece of cloth. If you close your eyes and pretend hard enough, you can call it tea. Mostly it's just warm, and that's good enough. There's no sugar. There hasn't been sugar here in months. If someone gets hold of any, they keep it for themselves or trade it for something more useful, like extra ammunition or a scrap of meat. You drink the tea, if you can call it that, in slow sips, trying to make it last. You eat standing up because there's no place to sit that isn't frozen solid or covered in rubble. You hold your cup close to your chest to keep the wind from stealing the heat, and you try to get it down before the thin liquid turns cold in your hands. The steam warms your face for a second, and then it's gone. Around you, everyone's doing the same. Heads bent over cups, chewing slowly, focusing on the food like it's the only thing keeping them upright. No one savours it. There's nothing to savour. You eat because you need the calories to move, to carry the rifle, to run if you have to. You eat because not eating means getting weaker, and here, weakness gets you dead faster than bullets. When the food's gone, you scrape the bottom of your cup with the spoon, licking off whatever's stuck there. If you're desperate, and most of the time you are, you'll rub the inside of the bread chunk in the cup to mop up the last bits. A few more bites, a few more seconds of chewing, and it's over. You hand the cup to the man collecting them. There's no washing between uses, just a quick shake to get rid of anything big. Tomorrow you'll get the same cup back, maybe with some of today's breakfast still stuck to it. There's no full feeling when you're done. You're still hungry, just slightly less than before. Your stomach still aches, but at least it's not completely empty. That's the best you can hope for here. Sometimes, when supplies are really bad, breakfast is nothing more than a handful of frozen sunflower seeds or a pinch of dried fish so salty it burns your mouth. Those mornings are worse than no breakfast at all, because they remind you of what food is supposed to taste like. Once in a while, someone manages to scavenge something better. A tin of meat, a few eggs, maybe even a potato. When that happens, it's shared among the men in your unit, each one getting just enough to remember what real food tastes like. It's not about fairness so much as keeping morale from sinking any lower than it already is. And then there are the days when there's nothing. No soup, no bread, nothing. You start the morning with an empty stomach. Go through the day on whatever you can find. A crust from your pocket, a piece of frozen carrot dug out from somewhere, anything at all. On those days, you think about breakfast more than the fighting. You think about it when you're huddled in a doorway, when you're lying in the snow, when you're staring at the ruins around you. Back home, breakfast used to be the easiest meal of the day. Here, it's another fight. Another thing to endure. You finish it not because you're satisfied, but because it's gone. You finish breakfast with that thin, lukewarm tea still sitting in your stomach, and for a few minutes you feel like you've got something resembling warmth inside you. But it fades fast. You're still thirsty, and you know you can't just reach for a canteen and take a long drink like you could anywhere else. Water in Stalingrad isn't your friend. It's another enemy, quieter than the Germans, but just as dangerous. The Volga is right there, massive and frozen over, but that doesn't mean you can drink from it. The ice looks clean from a distance, white and solid, but you know what's frozen inside it. Fuel, oil, ash, pieces of buildings, and worse. Things you don't talk about when you're trying to keep your stomach steady. Even if you hack through the ice, the water underneath is just as bad. Every drop is a gamble, and the odds are never in your favour. The wells are no better. Most of them are either frozen solid or contaminated. Bombs have hit them, walls have collapsed into them, and if they haven't been touched by shelling, they've been fouled by weeks of fighting. You've heard stories of men pulling up buckets with dead rats floating in them, or finding a strange oily film over the top that no one can explain. It doesn't matter how thirsty you are. 1 cup of that, and you might spend the next 2 days doubled over, if you live that long. Most of the time, you drink melted snow. That sounds simple until you try it here. Snow in Stalingrad isn't the clean, fluffy stuff you remember from back home. It's grey from smoke, gritty with ash and brick dust, and sometimes streaked with things you don't want to think about. You scoop it up anyway, drop it into whatever metal pot or can you've got, and hold it over a fire until it turns to water. You're supposed to boil it to kill whatever's in it, but boiling means fire, and fire means smoke, and smoke means attention. If you're lucky enough to be somewhere sheltered, you let it bubble for a few minutes before pouring it into your canteen. Most of the time, though, you heat it just enough to take the edge off the cold, and then you drink it as fast as you can before it freezes again. And yes, it freezes again. In winter here, water doesn't stay liquid for long. If you leave your canteen hanging at your side for an hour, you'll find it solid when you try to drink from it. Men carry them under their coats just to keep them from turning into ice blocks, which means your chest is always damp from the condensation, which means you're colder than you were before. Sometimes you find water in bomb craters. It's warm from the heat of the blast, still steaming in the cold air. You think twice before taking a sip, because it's not just dirt and debris in there. It's everything the explosion pulled in from the surrounding area. Still, you've seen men drink from them anyway, scooping with their helmets, or bending down to lap at it like animals. Thirst will make you do things you never thought you'd do. If you get dysentery, you don't have the luxury of resting until it passes. You keep moving, keep fighting, keep going, because stopping isn't an option. You drink just enough to keep your mouth from feeling like sandpaper, and you pray you'll make it to the next day. There's no clean water to recover with. The cure is just surviving until your body gives up on being sick. When supplies make it through, rare, but it happens, you might get a little tea or coffee. Not the kind you'd recognise. The tea's usually made from whatever dried leaves they can find, bitter and stale, and the coffee is more like scorched grain water. But it's hot, and hot counts for more than taste. You cradle it in your hands just for the heat, even before you drink it. Then there's the snow on your coat, the icicles on the edges of broken windows, the frozen drips from burst pipes. You find yourself looking at all of it and thinking, that's water. but the moment you put it in your mouth, it burns from the cold, and your tongue sticks to the ice. You do it anyway, because thirst is worse. You think about what it's like at home. Turning a tap, filling a glass, drinking until you don't want any more. Here, you drink just enough to keep your lips from cracking open. You ration every mouthful because you don't know when you'll get more. And you try not to think about the fact that every swallow could be the one that puts you flat on your back with fever. The truth is, here in Stalingrad, water isn't life. It's another roll of the dice. And every time you drink, you're betting your stomach, your strength, and maybe your life on something you can't see floating in it. Water for drinking is bad enough here. Water for washing is worse. You'd think the cold and the dirt and the stink might push you toward cleaning up whenever you can. It doesn't. Out here, hygiene isn't just optional, it's dangerous. And most of the time, it's pointless. Start with the basics. There's no bathhouse, no shower tent, no steady supply of hot water. If you want to wash, you've got two choices. Melt snow, or use whatever puddle hasn't frozen over completely. Both options come with their own set of problems. Snow is slow to melt, and you need fuel to heat it. Fuel that could be keeping you alive in other ways, like warming your food or boiling drinking water. Puddles are a gamble. You don't know what's in them, and given what's been falling out of the sky and rotting in the streets for months, you probably don't want to know. Even if you do manage to find enough water to wash, you have to do it fast. Strip off too much clothing and you'll be shaking so hard you can't hold a rifle. Skin that's been sweating under wool freezes faster when it's wet, and frostbite doesn't need much of an invitation. That's why most men here go weeks without so much as a splash of water on their faces. They scrape the dirt off when it gets unbearable, rub snow on their skin in a half-hearted attempt to freshen up, and call it good enough. Soap is almost non-existent. If you came with some, it's probably gone by now, traded away for food or cigarettes. Even if you still had it, it's not much use when there's nothing to rinse with. So you just let the grime build. Your hands get black with soot and oil from your weapon. Your neck stays streaked with sweat and dust. By the end of the week, the inside of your collar is so stiff with dirt it could stand up on its own. Your teeth aren't doing any better. Toothbrushes? Forget it. Toothpaste? Not even a rumour. Some men chew on a stick or run a finger over their teeth when they can, but mostly you just let them rot. The cold slows it down a little, but not much. Gums swell, teeth loosen, and the constant ache becomes just another background pain to ignore. If you're unlucky enough to get an infection, there's nothing to be done. You live with it until it either settles down or kills you. Then there are the lice. Everyone's got them. They live in your clothes, your seams, the folds of your scarf, and in your hair if you've got any left. You feel them moving at night when you're trying to sleep, tiny legs crawling across your skin. You scratch until you're bleeding, but they don't go away. In summer, you might burn them off with a candle. In winter, you can't risk the light. You just keep scratching and pretend it helps. The smell is something you stop noticing about yourself, but never about anyone else. It's layers of unwashed wool, stale sweat, smoke, and the faint sourness of rot. You stand in a room with 10 other men and the air feels thick with it. You breathe through your mouth, which helps with the smell, but leaves your tongue dry and cracked. Hands are filthy. There's no washing them after using the latrine, if you even have one. Most of the time you squat in whatever corner is out of the wind, then go right back to whatever you were doing. You wipe on your trousers or on the snow if there's any nearby. You eat with those same hands. You load your rifle with them. You touch your face without thinking. It's a miracle you're not sick more often. Or maybe you are, and you've just gotten used to feeling that way. If you do find a chance to really wash, maybe in a basement with a bucket and a bit of privacy, you strip down to your waist and sponge off with a rag. The water's cold enough to make your teeth ache, and by the time you're halfway through, your skin's covered in goosebumps. You scrub until the rag's black, then throw your clothes back on and shiver until your body heat catches up. For the first 5 minutes afterwards, you almost feel human again. Then you catch the scent of your greatcoat and remember, there's no getting rid of that. The longer you're here, the less you care. Not because you don't want to be clean, but because the effort's not worth it. You can't win against the dirt, the smell, the parasites. You just make peace with the fact that this is what you are now. Another soldier in the rubble, wrapped in layers of filth that no amount of scrubbing would really fix. And even if you could scrub yourself clean, you'd just be crawling back into the same lice-ridden clothes, walking through the same ash-choked streets, and sleeping on the same frozen ground. Here, hygiene isn't a goal, it's a memory. The day doesn't start with a to-do list. It starts with the one thing that's on it every single morning: don't die. Everything else you do is just a step toward that one goal. It sounds simple when you say it out loud. It isn't. There's no front line, the way people imagine it. In Stalingrad, the front line runs through every street, every block, every building. Sometimes it runs through a single wall, with you on one side and the enemy on the other. It's a constant tug of war over pieces of the city that don't even matter anymore, except as places to hide behind or shoot from. If you're lucky, your orders are to hold a position. That means finding whatever cover you can and staying there until someone tells you to move, which might not happen for hours or days. The cover could be a window with the glass blown out, a gap between two chunks of concrete, or a hole in the floor looking down into a basement. You watch. You wait. You keep your rifle ready and your head low. If you're not lucky, you're the one sent to move up. Moving means crossing open ground where every step is a risk. You stick to walls, crawl through rubble, and keep your eyes on the shadows because that's where the danger is. You move in short bursts, a sprint to the next doorway, a drop into the next crater. You don't look back. Looking back slows you down. The work itself is a mix of bursts of chaos and long stretches of waiting. The chaos is obvious. Incoming fire, the deafening crack of rifles and machine guns, the scream of artillery shells. You feel it in your bones when the ground shakes. The waiting is its own kind of punishment. You sit in the cold, muscles tense, every sound amplified until you start imagining footsteps where there aren't any. You're not just watching for the enemy. You're also watching for collapse. The buildings you use for cover aren't safe. One hit from a shell, one poorly placed step on a weakened floor, and the whole thing can come down on you. More than one man's been buried alive here, not by the enemy, but by the city itself giving way. Part of the job is scavenging. You check bodies for ammunition, weapons, anything useful. Sometimes they're yours, sometimes they're theirs. You take what you can because supply lines here are more wishful thinking than reality. If you need boots, and the man you find isn't using his anymore, You take them, even if you have to pry them off frozen feet. You also carry ammunition, messages, wounded men, whatever needs moving. Sometimes it's across a street under fire. Sometimes it's down into a basement that smells like damp earth and rot. You keep moving because stopping in the open is asking to get shot. Food, when it comes, is eaten fast. You don't sit down for it unless you're somewhere you trust, and there aren't many places like that. Most of the time you crouch in a corner, spoon in one hand, rifle within reach of the other. If you hear anything at all, you stop chewing and listen. The job also means dealing with the cold. You can't work the bolt of your rifle if your hands are frozen stiff, so you flex them constantly. You stamp your feet when you can, shift your weight from one leg to the other, and pull your scarf higher over your face to keep the wind from cutting into it. The cold doesn't care that you're trying to stay alive. It's working just as hard as the enemy to finish you. And then there's the part no one talks about much, waiting for someone else to make a mistake. Maybe it's the enemy sticking their head out just long enough for you to take the shot. Maybe it's one of your own getting caught in the open, and you have to decide if you can risk exposing yourself to help them. The job is as much about judgment as it is about endurance. Every now and then, there's movement orders. You're told to shift to a different position, cover another squad, or reinforce a building under attack. You go. It doesn't matter if you're tired, cold, or halfway through eating the only food you've had all day. You go because that's what keeps you alive. Doing what you're told before someone decides you're more trouble than you're worth. By the time the light starts to fade, you've been in the same clothes, in the same cold, with the same pounding in your head for hours. Your eyes feel gritty from the dust. Your throat's raw from breathing the freezing air, and your legs ache from crouching. You're not done. The job doesn't end because the sun goes down. It doesn't end at all. Staying alive here isn't about winning. It's about not losing. Not to the enemy, not to the cold, not to hunger, not to the city itself. Every step, every breath, every second is part of the work. And tomorrow you'll get up and do it all over again. The city isn't just full of soldiers, it's full of rats. Not the small, timid kind that scatter when you stamp your foot. These ones don't scare easy. They don't run unless they have to. And sometimes they don't run at all. They just sit there, looking at you like they're trying to figure out if you're competition or the next meal. They're everywhere. In the rubble, under the floorboards, in the rafters of the few buildings still standing. They run along the edges of the walls when you're trying to sleep, and sometimes they don't bother with the edges at all. They go right over your legs. You wake up to the sound of them gnawing at something in the dark, and it takes a moment to remember what you left sitting out that they could be chewing on. They're fat here. Fat like they have been eating better than the soldiers. And maybe they have. There's no shortage of food for them in Stalingrad. Spilled grain from bombed warehouses, scraps from the kitchens, and, most of all, the bodies. Frozen corpses are everywhere, and the rats don't care whose uniform they were wearing when they fell. You see them sometimes, half buried in snow, their whiskers twitching as they dig into whatever's left. You stop looking after the first few times. They get bold when food's scarce. You've heard the stories, and then you've seen it yourself, of men trying to sleep with their bread ration tucked under their coat, only to wake up to the sound of tearing cloth and the sharp bite of teeth on their hands. Rats will chew right through your pocket if they think there's something inside worth eating. More than one soldier's woken up bleeding from a rat bite, and in a place with no real medical care, that's not just disgusting, it's dangerous. You fight them in little ways. You stomp your feet when you hear them moving close. You throw chunks of brick in their direction. Sometimes you manage to kill one with a quick swing of a shovel or the butt of your rifle. And when you do, you don't always throw it away. No one talks about it out loud, but hunger changes the way you look at a dead rat. Some of the men roast them over a small fire, scrape the fur off with a knife, and eat them without much more than a shrug. You tell yourself you won't get that desperate, and then one day, maybe you will. You learn to guard your food like you guard your rifle. You keep it close, even when you're sleeping. You never leave a scrap lying around, not even a crumb. The rats will find it, and where there's one, there's 10 more behind it. Sometimes the rats get caught in the middle of the fighting. A shell lands, a wall comes down, and they pour out of the wreckage in a frantic wave, scattering in every direction. You don't even try to get out of their way. There's too many, and you're too busy watching for the follow-up shot. There's no winning the rat war. They were here before you, and they'll be here after. You just try to keep them from taking more than they already have. It's one more enemy you didn't sign up to fight. One more reminder that in Stalingrad, you're not at the top of the food chain. The cold here isn't just weather, it's a weapon. It doesn't care what side you're on, what orders you've been given, or how tough you think you are. It works on you the same way it works on everyone else. Slowly, steadily, until you can't tell the difference between discomfort and real danger anymore. It's the kind of cold that gets into your bones and stays there. You wake up with it, you go to sleep with it, and it follows you through every step of the day. There's no escaping it, because you can't layer enough clothing to keep it out. Not when every piece of fabric you own is already damp, stiff with frost, or torn. The greatcoat that's supposed to protect you feels more like a sponge, holding the cold against you instead of keeping it away. Your breath freezes on your scarf in minutes, turning it into a crusted mask that sticks to your skin. When you pull it away to adjust it, it rips tiny hairs from your face and leaves a raw patch that the wind immediately stings. Your eyelashes frost over, and sometimes they freeze together if you blink too slowly. You learn to keep moving just to keep your blood from settling, because once you're still for too long, it's 10 times harder to get warm again. The wind is the worst part. It finds every gap in your clothing, no matter how tight you've pulled your coat or how many rags you've wrapped around your boots. It comes down streets cleared by shellfire, screaming between the hollow shells of buildings, and hits you with a force that feels personal. There's no shelter from it unless you're deep underground, and even then, the cold just seeps through the walls and into your skin. You can't feel your fingers most of the time. Even with gloves, the cold works its way in until you can barely curl them around the rifle stock. Loading a clip takes twice as long because you can't get a good grip on the cartridges. Sometimes you just jam them in any way you can, hoping you've seated them right, because you can't afford to be fumbling when the shooting starts. Your feet are worse. They stay damp no matter what you do. Snow gets in through gaps in your boots. Sweat from walking soaks the rags you've wrapped around your toes. And by the end of the day, you're walking on blocks of ice that used to be part of your own body. You stamp them to get the feeling back, but all that does is replace numbness with pain. That sharp, stabbing burn that tells you the blood's moving again, but also reminds you you're one bad night away from losing a toe. The cold messes with your mind too. You start thinking about warmth the way you used to think about food, not as something you have, but as something you dream about. You remember what it felt like to sit next to a stove, to hold a mug of tea so hot it burned your palms, to have heat wrap around you instead of this constant biting air. Those thoughts can be dangerous. If you start thinking about them too much, you stop paying attention to the things that can kill you faster than the weather. You hear stories about men freezing to death while they slept, even in the middle of the city. They curl up in a corner, pull their coat over their head, and just don't wake up. Sometimes you pass them in the morning, sitting there stiff as stone, snow drifting over them like the city's already trying to bury them. You don't stop to look. You just keep moving, pulling your own coat tighter, trying not to think about how easily it could be you. There are tricks to surviving it, but none of them work well. You huddle with the others for body heat when you can, but that means staying still, and staying still means letting the cold settle deeper. You keep moving when you can, but that burns energy you can't spare when the food's already thin. You stand near fires if you find them, but fires bring smoke, and smoke brings artillery. It's all trade-offs, and none of them are good. The cold doesn't need to kill you outright to win. It just needs to slow you down, stiffen your hands, make your legs ache until you move a little slower. Aim a little worse, react a little too late. Out here, that's all it takes. So you keep stamping your feet, flexing your fingers, pulling your scarf higher over your face. You know it's not enough. You do it anyway, because the cold might not care about you, but you care about making it to the next day. You'd think in a battle this big, someone would have figured out how to keep the front supplied. They didn't. Or maybe they tried, and the Volga froze, the Luftwaffe bombed the roads, the rail lines were cut, and what little made it through vanished before it reached your hands. Either way, you don't have what you need. No one does. You carry a rifle if you're lucky, not the shiny, well-oiled weapon you might see in a propaganda poster. Yours is old, scratched, the wood worn smooth in spots from years of use. The bolt sticks if it's too cold. The sights are slightly off. And sometimes, when you pull the trigger, nothing happens, because the cartridge is a dud. You're supposed to clean it regularly, but cleaning means oil, and oil is a luxury. Too much, and it freezes solid. Too little, and the mechanism grinds like it's full of sand. Ammunition is rationed the way bread is rationed. Sparingly, with no promise there'll be more tomorrow. You might get a handful of cartridges in the morning and that's it. If you use them all, you'd better have taken something from the man you shot, because there's no guarantee anyone's bringing you more. Some soldiers go into combat with 3 bullets. 3. You hold them in your palm and wonder which 3 moments in the day are going to matter enough to spend them. Grenades are rare, and when you do get one, you treat it like gold. You might carry the same grenade for weeks, waiting for the right moment to use it, and when that moment comes, you'd better not waste it, because you probably won't see another one for a long time. Food is part of the supply problem too. You already know breakfast is thin, but it's not just the morning meal. Every scrap you get is part of a ration that's shrinking by the week. Some days you get nothing until nightfall. Some days you get nothing at all. You keep a piece of bread in your pocket for emergencies, even though you know the rats will smell it. You chew slowly, not because you want to savour it, but because you're trying to trick your body into thinking you've eaten more than you have. Clothing is no better. Your boots are cracked, your gloves are missing fingers, your coat is wearing thin in all the wrong places. There's no such thing as a fresh uniform. When something wears out, you replace it with whatever you can find. That might mean taking boots off a frozen body, or wearing a coat that still smells like the man who died in it. You don't think about it too much. You can't afford to. Medical supplies? Almost non-existent. Bandages are torn from sheets or ripped shirts, reused until they're stiff with old blood. Painkillers are so rare that most wounds are treated with a swig of whatever alcohol is available, and a lot of gritting your teeth. Infection is common, amputations are done without anaesthesia, and clean tools are a fantasy. You might get a shot of morphine if you're dying. If you're not, they save it for someone worse off. Fuel is another thing you never have enough of. Fires burn low because there's nothing to feed them. You tear up bits of wood from ruined furniture, burn scraps of paper, anything that will catch. When you do get a real fire going, you crowd around it like moths, knowing it won't last long before the wood is gone, or someone orders it out to keep the smoke from drawing fire. You hear stories about other units getting better supplies, new rifles, warm coats, even canned meat. You don't know if it's true, or just another rumour to keep people going. All you know is that whatever those other units are getting, it isn't reaching you. You make do with what's in your hands, and when that runs out, you make do with less. Sometimes supplies arrive. A truck makes it through the bombing, or a boat crosses the river under cover of darkness. Everyone crowds around, hoping for something. Ammunition, food, even just a pair of socks. The officers take their share first, then the rest is divided as best it can be. If you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you get nothing. If you're lucky, you get enough to last a couple of days before you're right back where you started. It wears on you. Every time you run low on something, you feel the weight of it in your chest. You start counting bullets, bites of bread, matches, drops of water. You think about every shot you fire, every mouthful you swallow, every time you strike a match to light a cigarette or a fire. You weigh the cost against what's coming next, and most of the time you can't see far enough ahead to know if you're making the right choice. The truth is, supplies here are like the weather. You take what you get when you get it, and you don't waste time asking for more. You already know the answer. You can be sitting perfectly still, not moving, not making a sound, and it still finds you. Death here doesn't always arrive in the form of a man with a rifle in his hands. More often, it comes from somewhere you can't see. Above you, below you. Sometimes both at the same time. The sky over Stalingrad is never really empty. On the good days, it's just the dull grey of winter, maybe with a few flakes of snow drifting down. On the bad days, it's a swarm of black dots moving in formation, each one carrying enough explosives to turn another piece of the city into dust. You hear them before you see them, the distant, steady hum that grows into a roar. By the time you spot them, it's too late to run. When the bombs fall, the sound is unlike anything else. A high, thin whistle that seems to stretch forever, then the gut punch crack when it hits. The ground jumps under you, air blasts against your chest, and dust fills your mouth before you can cough it out. You don't think, you just drop, curl in on yourself, and hope the building over your head, or the hole you're lying in, stays intact. Sometimes it doesn't. A direct hit doesn't leave much to find. The lucky ones are buried outright. The unlucky ones are half buried, calling for help you can't give because the shelling hasn't stopped. You learn fast that running out to pull someone free in the middle of a bombardment is a good way to add yourself to the pile. And the bombs aren't the only thing falling from above. Artillery shells crash into the city day and night, fired from positions you can't reach. They don't always aim for anything specific. Sometimes it's just about keeping everyone on edge. You're sitting in a corner, breaking off a piece of bread, and the next second the wall next to you is gone. It's random enough to make you paranoid and frequent enough to make you tired of being paranoid. But what's above you isn't the only threat. Below the city, there's another battlefield. Cellars, sewers, and tunnels that run under the rubble. Some are escape routes, some are supply lines, and some are death traps. You might be crouched in one, thinking you're hidden, when a shell lands nearby and the ceiling comes down. Or worse, the enemy's already there, moving quietly through the dark, waiting to come up behind you. Sewers are especially bad. You only go into them if you have no other choice. They're cramped, pitch black, and the air smells like rot and stagnant water. Every step is a blind guess where your foot's going to land. Sometimes you hear movement ahead, and you can't tell if it's rats, water, or boots. And if a grenade rolls in from the other end, there's nowhere to go. Even when you're not underground, the ground itself can turn on you. Basements collapse without warning. You're walking across a floor, and suddenly it gives way, dumping you into whatever's below. Rubble, twisted metal, maybe the remains of whoever was down there when it happened. The thing about death from above or below is you don't get to see it coming in the same way you do with a man raising a rifle. There's no time to aim, to duck behind cover, to return fire. You hear the whistle, the crack, the groan of a wall giving way, and then it's already done. It keeps you looking up and looking down even when you should be looking ahead. You start scanning rooftops and ceilings without thinking, stepping around cracks in the floor, avoiding certain streets because they've been hit so many times the buildings are more air than wall. And you know none of it will really save you if your number's up. So you keep moving, knowing that at any moment the sky could drop something on you, or the ground could swallow you whole. Here, safety isn't a place. It's just the time between one impact and the next. There are parts of this city where the front line isn't measured in kilometres or even metres. It's measured in walls. You're in one room, the enemy's in the next, and the only thing between you is a chunk of brick with more holes in it than solid surface. You don't need binoculars to find them. You can smell them. It's not just the stink of unwashed bodies, though that's there. Weeks or months of sweat soaked into uniforms that have never been cleaned. It's the sharp tang of gun oil, the bitter smoke of whatever they've been burning for heat, and underneath it, the metallic scent of blood that never quite washes out of a place, no matter how much snow falls on it. The smell carries through cracks in the walls, through shattered floorboards, through holes blasted in ceilings. You hunch in a corner with your rifle, and you can tell they're close, even if they're not making a sound. Sometimes you hear breathing, a low cough, the scrape of a boot on stone. Sometimes you hear nothing at all, but the smell tells you they're there, just as surely as if you could see them. The fighting in these spaces is nothing like the open field. It's all angles and shadows, blind corners and stairwells that can kill you in 2 seconds. You don't step through a doorway without tossing something in first if you have it. A grenade, a chunk of brick, anything to make them flinch before you go in. If you don't have anything, you just go fast and hope your aim is quicker than theirs. There are buildings where both sides are in the same structure, just on different floors. You might be in the basement while the enemy's upstairs, or you're holding the ground floor while they're in the attic. You can hear them moving above you, their boots creaking on the boards, and you know they can hear you too. Sometimes they're shooting straight through the floors, the bullets punching through wood and plaster as if neither existed. It gets so close you can talk to them. Men have shouted insults or demands through walls, not because they expect a surrender, but because it rattles the nerves. Some have traded cigarettes or matches across a neutral doorway, only to be shooting at each other again a few minutes later. The danger isn't just in front of you, it's everywhere. Bullets come from angles you didn't even think were possible. You're leaning to check a window, and one comes in from the side through a hole you didn't know was there. You're crouched behind a pile of rubble, and a grenade bounces in from somewhere behind you. Every direction is a threat, and the only thing you can do is keep your head moving and your weapon ready. The smell becomes part of the tension. You get so used to the stink of your own side that when something shifts, a new scent in the air, stronger, sharper, your pulse jumps. You know they're moving in. You know they're closer than they were a minute ago. Sometimes that's all the warning you get before the shooting starts. And when it does, it's loud in a way that doesn't carry across an open battlefield. Here, the sound bounces off walls, slams back into your ears. Muzzle flashes blind you for a split second, and by the time your eyes adjust, you've already shifted position because staying in one spot is asking to be hit. There's no space, no clean separation between where you end and they begin. Just walls, smells, sounds, and the constant knowledge that at any second one of you is going to push through the gap and try to finish the other. You stop thinking of the people around you as permanent, not because you want to, but because the city keeps proving they're not. In Stalingrad, friendships aren't measured in years or even months. They're measured in days, sometimes hours. One night you're huddled together in a half-collapsed room, passing around a cigarette and talking about home. The next morning, one of you isn't there, and nobody needs to ask why. It happens fast. Maybe they're hit by a sniper while crossing an alley. Maybe a shell drops in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe they go out on a patrol and don't come back. You don't always find out the details, because there's no time to ask, and no one to answer. You just notice the empty space where they were, and then you fill it with someone else. Sometimes the bodies come back. More often they don't. If they do, they're frozen stiff, faces grey and hard to recognise under the frost and the dirt. You try not to look too closely. You help carry them if you have to, laying them in a corner until someone can drag them out to whatever passes for a burial here. A shallow hole if the ground's soft enough. A pile of snow if it isn't. The new faces arrive just as quickly as the old ones disappear. Fresh from the other side of the river. Sometimes still clean-shaven. Their coats less worn. Their eyes not yet dulled by the weeks. They get a short briefing, a rifle if there's one available, and then they're standing where your friend was standing yesterday. You learn their names if you bother to ask, and then you wait to see how long they last. You stop making promises to write to anyone's family. At first, you tell yourself you'll remember the address, the name of their wife or mother, what they looked like when they were still alive. But after enough disappearances, the memories start to blur together. You remember the sound of their laugh or the way they smoked, but you can't place it to the right face anymore. The hardest ones are the men you've known since before this place. Maybe you trained together. Maybe you fought in another battle. Maybe you grew up in the same town. You get used to seeing them every day, used to hearing their voice, used to knowing they've got your back. And then one night, a mortar shell hits the building you're in, and when the dust clears, they're not answering anymore. You move their things into your pack, maybe a bit of food, a box of cartridges, because someone will use them, and the war doesn't stop for grief. You learn not to ask, "Where's so-and-so?" because the answer is almost always the same, and it doesn't make you feel better to hear it. If they're not in sight, they're either gone or on their way to being gone. Either way, they're not coming back to sit beside you tonight. The replacements keep coming. The faces keep changing. You stop trying to remember them all. You focus on the ones who are here now, and even then, you keep some distance in your mind. Not because you don't care, but because caring doesn't stop the empty space from opening up in the morning. You might think the only reason you're still fighting is because the Germans are on the other side of the street. That's only half of it. The other half is standing somewhere behind you, watching, making sure you don't stop. The official term for them is blocking detachments. Everyone just calls them what they are. Men with guns pointed at your back. They're NKVD troops, and their orders are simple. Nobody retreats without permission. If you break and run, they shoot you. If you drop your weapon and try to slip away, they shoot you. If you hesitate when the order to advance comes, they make sure you regret it, assuming you live long enough to regret anything. You don't have to be caught in the act to be punished. Sometimes an entire unit is held responsible for one man's mistake. Maybe someone panics under fire and falls back a few meters. The next thing you know, you're all lined up in front of an officer who's reading out names for disciplinary action. In this place, that phrase usually means someone's not walking away. Then there's the political officers. They give the speeches, read orders from headquarters, remind you that this isn't just about survival. It's about defending the motherland. They tell you stories about Soviet heroes who fought to the last bullet, and they make it clear that's how you're expected to go out too. Sometimes they believe what they're saying. Sometimes you can see in their eyes they're just as cold, hungry, and tired as you are, but they're not allowed to show it. Punishment can be public. Men have been shot in front of their comrades as an example. You stand there in the snow, rifle at your side, watching someone you shared a trench with drop into the dirt because he disobeyed an order or was accused of cowardice. No trial worth mentioning, just a few shouted words and the crack of a pistol. The message is always the same. You're more afraid of the people behind you than the ones in front. It's not all bullets and threats. There are motivations of another kind. Promises of extra rations, warm clothing, maybe a letter home sent through faster channels. These offers are rare, and they're always tied to something dangerous. Hold a building against 3 counterattacks, and you might get an extra piece of bread. Make it across the street under fire to deliver a message, and maybe you'll get a handful of tobacco. There's also the quiet pressure. You don't want to be the one who looks weak when everyone else is still standing. You don't want your name in a report to some faceless commander miles away, marked down as a liability. Word gets around about men who are sent on special assignments after stepping out of line. No one ever sees them again, and no one asks. You keep moving forward, not just because the Germans are shooting at you, but because you know the NKVD is watching from somewhere behind the smoke. They're not loud about it. They don't need to be. All it takes is one body in the snow with a bullet in the back to remind everyone of the rules. And so you fight on, trapped between two enemies, the one trying to kill you from the front, and the one making sure you don't stop from behind. In Stalingrad, motivation doesn't always come from speeches or ideals. Sometimes it comes from the simple fact that you've got nowhere else to go. If you get wounded here, you don't think about recovery. You think about whether you'll live long enough to make it to someone who can stop the bleeding. And when you do, you quickly realise that medical treatment in Stalingrad is just another test of how much pain you can take before you pass out. There's no clean hospital with white sheets and nurses. There's a basement with a table that might have been a door an hour ago. The light comes from a candle stuck into a bottle, and it flickers just enough to make you wish it would go out so you can't see what's about to happen. The air smells like a mix of blood, sweat, damp earth, and whatever passed for disinfectant, usually alcohol if there's any to spare. The man working on you might be a trained medic, or he might just be the only one in the building who's done this before. He doesn't have time for bedside manners. He asks where you're hit, takes one look, and decides whether it's worth trying to fix. If it is, the first step is always the same. Strip away whatever's covering it. If your coat or shirt's frozen to the wound, he doesn't bother unfastening anything. He cuts, pulls, or just rips it free, and the shock makes you want to scream before he's even touched the injury itself. Anaesthetic is rare. If you're lucky, someone hands you a piece of leather or cloth to bite down on. If you're luckier, they pour you a swallow of vodka or industrial alcohol to take the edge off. Most of the time, you get nothing but a warning. This will hurt. And then it starts. If the wound's dirty, it has to be cleaned. That means pouring whatever liquid they've got into it. Water, if they have to. Alcohol, if you're fortunate. And scraping out the grit with something sharp. The liquid burns like it's on fire, and the scraping makes you see white spots in the air. You hold still, because jerking away might mean the difference between keeping the limb and losing it. Stitches are done fast and ugly, thick black thread in knots that pull the skin into puckers. There's no concern about scars. The only concern is whether the wound will hold together long enough for you to get back to your post. Bandages are rags, often already stained from someone else. They're wrapped tight, not for comfort, but to keep whatever's inside from coming back out. If it's a bullet lodged somewhere deep, they might go after it with whatever tools at hand. A pair of pliers, a knife, even a bayonet if that's all they've got. There's no clean line between surgery and torture here. The goal isn't to make you whole again. It's to make you functional enough to hold a rifle. If the injury's bad enough, a shattered bone, a limb too far gone, there's no discussion. Amputation happens right there on the table, with a saw or a blade heated in the fire. They work fast because the faster it's over, the less chance you'll bleed out. Or you pass out from the pain or the blood loss, and when you wake, if you wake, you're lighter than before. Infection is the constant enemy. You know it's coming when the wound swells, when the heat rises in your skin, when the ache turns into a throb that keeps you awake even through exhaustion. There's no penicillin. The answer is to cut it open again, drain it, and pack it with whatever cloth they can find. You've seen men survive the initial wound only to die shivering with fever a week later. And through all of it, there's no guarantee it will work. You could go through the worst pain of your life and still not make it. But the medics keep trying, because sometimes it's the only thing left to do. And when it's your turn, you grit your teeth, you hold still, and you hope that when they're finished, you'll still be a soldier, instead of a name someone scratches off a list. Every so often, someone says you're going to get a break. Not leave, not a trip home, just a few hours or maybe a day out of the worst of it. You hear the word rest, and for a moment you imagine something soft under your back. A meal you don't have to eat standing up. A little silence. Then reality catches up. Rest here doesn't mean comfort. It means you're not under direct fire for the moment. It means you're moved to a building that's only half ruined instead of barely standing, or a corner of the city where the shooting's happening a few streets away instead of right outside. You still keep your rifle with you, still sleep in your boots, still wake at every noise. The first thing you notice in these so-called rest spots is how cold they are. Without the constant movement of combat, the cold settles in deeper. You huddle in your coat, breath fogging in front of you, trying to find a spot out of the wind. If you're lucky, there's a small stove or fire, but fuel is scarce, and it's usually kept low to avoid drawing attention. There's usually a little more food here, but not much. Maybe an extra ladle of soup that's more water than anything else, or a scrap of bread that isn't already frozen solid. You eat it slowly, not because you're savouring it, but because your stomach's shrunk enough that even small portions feel like something. The quiet feels strange at first. Without the constant crack of rifles or the thump of artillery, your ears start picking up smaller sounds. The creak of wood, the drip of water, the shuffle of boots in the next room. You know it won't last, and that knowledge sits in the back of your mind like a weight. Sleep is the main reason for rest, but it's never the deep kind you remember from before. You lie down on whatever surface is available. A floor covered in rags, a bench, a corner of bare ground, and pull your coat over you. You try to let go, but your brain doesn't stop tracking sounds, footsteps, voices. You wake often, not always sure what pulled you out of whatever shallow dream you were in. Sometimes rest means repair. You patch holes in your coat with bits of cloth, rewrap your feet in whatever rags you can find, scrape frost from your weapon and clean it as best you can. It's the kind of work you can only do when you're not firing or moving, and you know you'll pay for skipping it later. There's talk during these pauses. Not the loud kind, not laughter. Just low voices trading news, rumours, or memories. Someone might share a cigarette, someone else might hand over a crust of bread, and for a little while you remember you're not entirely alone here. Those moments are worth more than the extra food or the slightly better shelter. But it always ends. A messenger comes in, or an officer steps through the doorway, and the word goes around. The rest is over. You're packing up, checking your rifle, stamping warmth back into your feet. Whatever small measure of comfort you had, you leave it behind and step back into the ruin, knowing it might be a long time before you see anything like it again. You can close your eyes in Stalingrad, you can block your ears, but you can't ever get away from the smell. It's the first thing that hits you when you step outside, and the last thing you notice before sleep takes you. if it takes you at all. It's not one smell. It's 100 of them layered over each other until they become something you can't name, only recognise. The sharp tang of smoke is always there, from fires still burning in the shells of buildings months after they were hit. Wood smoke? Coal smoke? Sometimes the acrid bite of something chemical? Paint? Fuel? Insulation? Turning into black air. It clings to your coat, your hair, your skin, until you smell it on yourself and can't wash it off. Mixed into that is the constant reek of rot. Food gone bad in cellars that were never emptied. Grain spilled into the streets, frozen into a crust in winter, turning to mush when it thaws. And worse than that, the bodies. Some buried under rubble, some lying in the open, all of them changing with the weather. In the cold, they stiffen and grey, a dull, frozen version of death. In the brief thaws, the air turns thick and sour, and the smell carries for blocks. You learn to tell fresh from old without looking. Fresh is sharper, metallic, almost clean in its way. Old is heavy and clings to the back of your throat. Both have a way of getting into your head until you taste them, even when you're not breathing through your nose. There's the smell of the living too, and it's not much better. Unwashed bodies in unwashed uniforms, sweat soaked into wool and never allowed to dry. Feet that haven't been bare in months. Add in the constant presence of rats. Their musk, their droppings, the sour odour when one dies under a pile of rubble. And you stop separating one stink from another. It's all just part of the same air. Sometimes the wind shifts and you catch something different. Fuel from a tank or a truck. The sharp bite of cordite after a firefight. The faint scent of bread or stew from a field kitchen. And for a second, it cuts through everything else. Then it's gone, swallowed by the rest of the city's breath. You stop noticing it after a while, or at least you tell yourself you do. But when you think about home, whatever home is now, you realise you can't remember what clean air smells like. You try, but all you get is Stalingrad. Smoke, rot, sweat, and snow. And even if the fighting stopped tomorrow, you know the smell wouldn't leave. It's in the bricks, the streets, the ground itself. Long after the last shot is fired, the city will still carry it, and anyone who's been here will recognise it the moment they breathe in. They tell you victory is close. You hear it in the speeches, in the rumours passed from man to man. The Germans are surrounded. Supplies are running out on their side. Every day you hold your ground, the circle tightens. But victory here isn't the kind you imagined before you came. There's no marching band, no flags waving in the streets, no clean uniforms for the photographs. It's just more of the same rubble, the same cold, the same smell of the city pressing into your lungs. The only difference is the gunfire's a little less constant, the artillery a little further away. By now, you're not thinking about winning. You're thinking about making it to the next day without a bullet, a shell, or a piece of falling brick ending you. You have been here long enough to know that a final push is just another way of saying more men will die before it's over. You've seen enough to know you might be one of them. When the Germans start surrendering in groups, it feels strange. They come out of cellars and ruined buildings, pale and shivering, hands raised. Some look barely older than boys. Others are gaunt, hollow-eyed, their uniforms hanging loose on their frames. You watch them shuffle past and realise they're not much different from you now. Cold, hungry, exhausted, wondering how they're still alive. the fighting doesn't stop all at once. Even in the last days, there are pockets of resistance. Snipers who refuse to give up. Men too cut off to hear the orders. You move cautiously through the streets, because victory doesn't mean safe. Not here. When it's finally officially over, no one cheers. You just stand there, rifle in your hands, wondering what to do next. Some men light cigarettes. Some sit down where they are, staring at nothing. Others start picking through the ruins for anything useful. Food, clothing, boots that might be in better shape than their own. You think about going home, but home feels like a place you left years ago. Even if you make it back, you know you won't be the same. You've carried too much of this city inside you. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the faces that aren't here anymore. Victory means you lived through Stalingrad. That's all. And when you look around at the emptiness where your friends used to be, at the frozen streets and the buildings that will never stand straight again, you can't help but wonder if surviving is the same thing as winning. And so you leave Stalingrad, or you don't. Some stayed forever, under the snow and rubble. Others walked away but never really left, carrying pieces of this place in their heads and in their lungs. The war moves on, but Stalingrad stays where it is, frozen in the same winter, echoing with the same sounds, holding on to the smell that never fades. You tell yourself you survived, that's true, in the way that numbers on a page are true. But survival here isn't about walking away whole, it's about still being able to move when it's over, even if every step takes you further from the person you were when you arrived. Stalingrad doesn't give you clean memories or neat endings. It gives you fragments. A friend's laugh cut short. A wall collapsing in the night. The weight of a rifle in your hands when your fingers were too numb to feel it. Those pieces stay with you, whether you want them or not. And if you're lucky, if you live long enough to see another city, another winter, you might breathe air that doesn't taste like smoke and snow. You might hear silence that isn't just the pause between explosions. And for a moment, you might believe you've finally left this place behind. But Stalingrad has a way of following you. It's not in the map anymore, not in the orders, not in the headlines. It's in you. And once it's there, it never really lets go.